This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the American Monetary Association's podcast, where we explore how monetary policy impacts the real lives of real people and the action steps necessary to preserve wealth and enhance one's lifestyle.
It's my pleasure to welcome Chrysta Castan eda. She is the go-to lawyer for high-stakes contentious litigation in the energy industry and beyond. She's a Dallas trial lawyer and head of the Castan eda firm, a boutique litigation firm that handles complex commercial oil and gas disputes. There's obviously a lot going on in the energy industry right now with prices collapsing. Her firm won a very large verdict for her client, Boone Pickens. It was a $145 million verdict. She is also running for Texas Railroad Commissioner and has a lot to share with us about some insights into the energy industry and maybe a little bit about her book, The Last Trial of T. Boone Pickens. Chrysta, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's good to have you on. So first off, just give us a quick overview of what happened with T. Boone Pickens and this investment deal gone bad. You know, many of our listeners are investors, and we always say try to avoid pooled money investments. And oil and gas is particularly risky, but T. Boone Pickens is an oil and gas man, so I guess he would know his way around this stuff. What happened?
So Pickens invested in an area of mutual interest play, also known as an AMI agreement, for 15% in 2007 in the Permian. And back then, the Permian hadn't proved out. It looked like it was, had petered out and wasn't really a place people were looking for oil anymore.
And this, by the way, is the Permian Basin, which is an oil reserve. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's where all the oil is being produced in West Texas now. I mean, if it were a country, it'd be the 8th largest oil-producing country in the world. So anyway, back in 2007, Pickens agreed to participate for 15% in this investment deal. And the idea of it is it's kind of like a series of option contracts. The parties agree that they're going to go buy leases in a certain county, certain sections, and every time they pick one up, the people agree, okay, I'm in for my 15%, which means I get 15% of the ownership and the profits, or I'm passing on this one. So Pickens signed up and agreed to participate in every one of those deals. And then you drill the wells and prove that there's oil there, and you try to do it under the radar, because what you want to do is pick up as much land and as much territory and then prove it out and then sell it for many, many times what your investment was.
In other words, you want to do that quietly so other wildcatters don't get wind of it and then start competing with you to buy up the land and the leases of oil wells, right?
Exactly. Before you get into that bidding war, you want to prove up your land and your concept and hope you start the bidding war. That's how, you put pennies in and you get millions out. That's the concept of these deals. And what ended up happening was that one of the investors needed to bring in more of a piece of the pie to spread its risk among sub-investors, which is how this gets done. And so they claimed that Pickens said he wanted out of the deal, and they tried to buy his interest, didn't end up buying his interest, but ended up taking his 15% going forward anyway. And so that's what the lawsuit was about, and we did end up winning $145 million.
How much did T. Boone Pickens invest in that deal? You never said that. You said it was a 15% share, but can you disclose what he actually put into the deal?
Sure. By the time we went to trial, he had a little over $1 million in the deal. And of course, the million was supposed to turn into what we claimed at one point, $1 billion. And in fact, the whole pie it ended up being worth several billion dollars. So we were claiming Pickens 15% plus a little bit more because we were litigating the issue.
Yeah. Okay, good. So basically the verdict, the judgment you got for the $146 million was for lost profits. That was the opportunity cost, or $145 million, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it was pared back by a series of court rulings about which part of the properties we could end up claiming. And there were limitations issues. You have to bring claims. You have to bring claims within a certain period of time. In Texas, that's 4 years. And so all those rules got applied, and we were allowed to ask the jury for exactly what we got.
Sure. Okay, good stuff. Well, that's a fascinating story, and the book is just about to be released, I guess. So looks very, very fascinating. And again, that's The Last Trial of T. Boone Pickens. If we can shift gears, though, for a moment, everybody's talking about the Wuhan virus, coronavirus, whatever we want to call it, COVID-19. And after, we saw as we saw the financial markets plummet, so did the oil market. And I mean, it is just shocking to see what has happened to oil prices. You know a lot about the economics of the energy industry. What's going on and what can we expect in the future?
Well, those are great questions. So, number one thing is we're all staying in our houses. We are not driving to work. We are not driving to restaurants and bars. We aren't taking trips. We aren't flying anywhere. That has cratered demand for oil and gas. Yeah. So what's ended up happening is, and particularly here in Texas, but also in Saudi Arabia and Russia, they've taken this particular period of time as the opportunity to start a supply war. So they are oversupplying the market, which was already oversupplied. And oil has dropped down into the teens and low 20s from where it was 3 months ago, which was in the 60s per barrel. That's West Texas Intermediate. And so the oil companies are hemorrhaging cash right now. And in fact, they're being told by pipeline companies here in Texas, don't even plan on producing because we can't take any more. Our storage facilities are becoming glutted with the excess supply. Yeah. It is an incredible time.
They're actually using oil tankers are now being used as storage units. Even, it's not about shipping the oil. It's about literally just storing it because there's such an oversupply.
And if you have such vessels, or empty tanks, you're making money like crazy. But the oil companies themselves there's no place for their product to go. Wow. And so we are in a really, really challenging time for the industry right now. And so, the Railroad Commission of Texas, which has nothing to do with railroads, it has everything to do with oil and gas. It is our oil and gas regulator, is for the first time in 40 years considering whether to enact production controls because it was the first OPEC.
So what are we going to do about this? So production control can only be as far as Texas, though. I mean, you can't control Saudi Arabia and Russia and Venezuela and stuff. Well, Venezuela's a disaster anyway, but that's a different discussion. Right.
So interestingly, you mentioned that I'm running for the Texas Railroad Commission. The Republican incumbent lost his election, which interestingly apparently has freed him up to advocate for what Republicans almost never advocate for, which is production controls. And he's actually going to Saudi Arabia and talking with Russia about some kind of coordinated response to try to limit production internationally. And then there are also interstate agreements whereby, we could limit production, North Dakota could limit production. There is a coordinated market mechanism. I don't know that Saudi Arabia and Russia are our friends, and I'm skeptical that the strategy is going to work on that level. But I think for Texas producers, at least, the commission has got to hold the hearings that now oil companies themselves are asking be held to figure out what to do about this.
Okay, so you and the Republican incumbent, your opponent, are both for production controls, right?
Well, what I'm calling for is to actually dust off the machinery that hasn't been used for 40 years, figure out whether it still works in the age of horizontal drilling and how it would look, and then gather the information. For goodness sake, the one thing we need right now is government that gathers information and acts promptly and decisively to mitigate all of these risks, whether it's a health perspective or whether it's markets crashing. We need functioning governance, and this is what's proving it out.
Mm-hmm. So consumers listening to this might say, well, what's the problem here? I like cheap gas for $1.99. I mean, that's the cheapest I've seen it in forever. They're thinking this is a good thing. But the bigger problem is that when you put all these oil producers out of business, and you'll want to elaborate on this, I'm no expert, but you put them out of business, then when you need their product again, they're not there to supply it. And you have this supply-demand shock issue that we're experiencing with other products right now because China was offline for, a good 3+ months. It's a national security issue to see that we have an oil industry in the country, right?
I mean, yes, you're exactly right. And the problem with no regulation is that the shocks come through unmitigated, right? There's this, what they call a bullwhip effect. So, it's great right now where we're all paying less than $2 a gallon for gasoline, even though we're all staying home. But what is going to end up happening is that bullwhip is going to come back up to where, we're paying $4-5 a gallon for gasoline because there isn't, a functioning market for oil and gas production because so many people have been driven out of business. You want an orderly transition from phase to phase, and we're definitely not going to get that with nobody taking a look at these issues. Thank God the Railroad Commission is waking up, but for so long it's been asleep at the wheel, and I just hope it's not too late.
Well, so why do they call it the Railroad Commission? I mean,
so
what's the railroad thing have to do with it?
Yeah, it's over 100 years old.
Yeah.
It was originally set up because, of all things, grain shippers in Texas could not get the railroads to transport their grain for fair prices and, allow shipping interstate and out of the state. And so it was set up to regulate the railroad industry. And then later on, the federal government has almost exclusive control over our railway system now. And so the Railroad Commission no longer has any role to play with railroads, but it picked up oil and gas regulation about 100 years ago as well. And they've just never changed the name.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I mean, that's not the first agency that's like that. But what do we do to keep it in business? Keep the oil industry in business. Obviously, shale's out because that's just too expensive to produce, unless oil's like $50 a barrel or something like that, right?
Yeah, so a lot of the producers are hedged at $50. There's a little bit of a cushion here. What's going to happen is I had mentioned that a couple of companies had filed a petition to have a hearing on this issue. And those companies are going to be heard on April the 14th. And I hope what ends up happening is the Railroad Commission gathers the information necessary and makes some hard decisions about how to help guide the industry and, frankly, a lot of Texas jobs and a huge portion of our state revenues into a little calmer environment. But the answer's not here yet.
Yeah. So what do you expect? I mean, what's coming down the road here? We're in such uncharted territory with the pandemic, and I don't know that I really ever see, even when this blows over, at least for quite a while, the same level of travel. A lot more people are going to work at home now. I think these are things that are going to stick with us to an extent, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's no question that we have been changed and will be changed by this event. We are still social creatures. We still will seek our favorite restaurants and watering holes and, vacations on the beach. But will it shift the way we work fundamentally to where we do more work from home? Possibly. I think there's a lot of employers who are figuring out, yes, people can be working from home, and maybe we don't need huge real estate portfolios to house all those people at the office. Your guess is as good as mine on that stuff, but I think pretty clearly life will change as a result of this.
Yeah, it definitely
Probably
will.
In some ways for the better.
Yeah, right. In some ways for the better. Agreed. But for sure, probably a lessening in demand for oil and other energy products as well, right?
At least for the short term, I would agree with that. There's one really interesting aspect of oil and gas that doesn't get talked about a lot, and that is plastics. Mm-hmm. All you need to do is look at your clothing or your pen or your computer screen or your cell phone and realize that our lives are suffused with oil and gas in the products that we use every day, even if we don't drive gasoline-powered vehicles. So how that transition gets made, it remains to be seen. But, I think we're going to have the need for plastics and therefore the need for petroleum products with us for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. No question about that. Okay, good. Well, what else do you want to share with people, either about the case or the oil industry, just anything I haven't asked you?
Well, we started talking about the book, and I think the book is a really interesting picture of what it's like to be in the Texas oil patch. This case was tried in Pecos, Texas for 5 weeks. Uh-huh. T. Boone Pickens, the former corporate raider, remember this is the guy who terrorized Wall Street in the 1980s with his takeover attempts. Yeah. At 88 years old, sat through that trial every day trying to get justice for him being cut out of a deal. Right. And so it's a very interesting, in my opinion, juxtaposition of his early life and his later life. And if you're interested in trial drama at all, I'm hoping people think it's a really interesting read. So,
do you think we'll see a movie out of it?
I would love to see a movie out of it. If Reese Witherspoon is listening, and I hope she is, I think she'd be great at playing me. So we can cross our fingers.
Yeah, there you go. But what was the big deal? I mean, here you've got T. Boone Pickens, a billionaire, in, I guess this is a little podunk court or not. Am I wrong about that? I mean, I've never heard of the county you mentioned, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. So this Pecos, Texas, I think its normal population is about 8,000 people, and it's swelled with all the oil workers, right? But it is the heart of the Permian Basin. It is where, it is the very center of where all this development was going on. But it's got the infrastructure of the 1950s and 60s. And so, the judge who presided over a trial, he has 3 counties, one of which is Loving County, only has 102 people in the entire county. This was Reeves County. So he would ride circuit from as we call it, from county to county. And it was his first trial, and there was just a lot of really interesting things that happened. When you're trying a case in a 100-year-old courthouse with technology that is not really up to par, and all these lawyers. I mean, we had probably 10, 15, 20 lawyers
that's
involved
incredible.
In this case.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And this was, I guess, a state court, not a federal courthouse, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
most of our contract disputes in the United States get tried in state court.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah. If there were cross state lines, it'd end up in federal court probably. But yeah, very interesting stuff. Well, thank you for sharing this with us, and please give out your website. Obviously, the book is available in all the usual places, but maybe you have a direct website you want to share with people.
Sure. So the book is website is lasttrialoftboonpickens.com. And it is out, and the Amazon is delaying shipping because of the need to put out essential products right now, and they're not shipping books. But you can order it directly from the publisher, and that's Texas A&M University Press. And then campaign website is Chrysta, Chrysta for Texas.com if people are interested about the Railroad Commission.
All right, Chrysta. Well, thanks for joining us, and good luck on the election, and be well.
Thank you, and thanks for chatting. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.